Hello, I'm Tiffany Thomas with the Oracle Applications User Group. Welcome everyone to OAUG's webinar brought to you by the OAUG Emerging Leaders titled Get Started with Oracle Mobile Approvals App for eBusiness Suite, a Case Study. The OAUG Emerging Leaders is focused on helping people who are just beginning their career with Oracle applications or just beginning their career in general. Visit the OAUG Emerging Leaders page to join our LinkedIn group, become a mentee or mentor, and so much more. There are also other ways throughout the OAUG to get involved. Join a GEO or SIG to network with peers and attend live events. You can also hear tips and tricks from subject matter experts by watching OAUG Pro Tips videos. Lastly, use the OAUG Conference Paper Database to quickly access thousands of papers and presentation slides from past Collaborate conferences. Now, before I introduce the speaker today, I would like to go over a couple housekeeping items. You will be on mute throughout the presentation. If you would like to ask a question, please type it into the question box in your control panel at any time. Once the presentation has concluded, I'll read the questions back so the presenter can respond. We are recording this session and it will be available on the OAUG website later today. I would like to introduce your presenter for today, Gunja, Solutions Architect and EBS lead with over 14 years of experience. Take it away, John.
Thank you, Tiffany. Just a spell check right there. My name is John Gunja, so it's a G-U-N-J-A. So let me go started. Can you all see my screen? Tiffany, can you see my screen well?
Yes, looks great.
All right, thank you so much. So good afternoon, everybody. Again, my name is John Gunja. We are going to be looking at a case study for the mobile approvals app that we implemented for our eBusiness suite sometime early last year. Me and one of my coworkers, Uli Alois, who is a team lead, was part of this presentation, and he and I did this presentation at Collaborate this year. He is not going to be joining us today, but I'm going to be going over all the slides for you today. With that, just a brief introduction about myself. I'm a solution architect and EBS lead. I've been doing Oracle EBS for the past 14 years. Played various roles, have been doing consulting focused the past 9 years for Southern Company. And when it comes to our company, we are focused on ERP services and a few other staffing and business intelligence and data management services that we provide. The agenda for today's webinar is we're going to be looking at this app. It's called Oracle Mobile Approvals App and the prerequisites for it, and how did we get it to our end users, and what did we have to do on the application side to make that app available and up and running, and some of the limitations of the app that we learned, and also the challenges and some of the lessons we learned during that process. One thing that this presentation is not going to cover is how do you do push notifications using mobile cloud services. I'll touch a little more in detail as we go along the presentation. And this presentation is also not going to cover anything in detail about mobile application framework, and that's the framework that anyone would use to build a custom app from scratch. So we're not going to be doing any of that in this presentation. And also this presentation is only focused on one particular mobile app, which is called the approvals for EBS. There are tons of mobile apps out there for EBS, but we're going to be focused on this mobile approvals app for EBS in this presentation. Coming to the prerequisites and what is needed to get this app up and running. This particular app is focused to do approvals on any notifications that are waiting for a response. For example, if an expense report is waiting for a manager's approval, they could do that from this app. If a purchase order is waiting on an engineer to be approved, he could do that from this. So any notification that is waiting for approval or any kind of response could be done with this particular mobile app. And this is only available for anyone who is on 12.1.3 and above. and it is free to use as long as you have an EBS product that uses workflow approvals. Pretty much, it's one of the core products. So if you're using any kind of workflow notifications today, I believe you should be able to use this app for free. And you would have to use a virtual private network if your EBS is not exposed over internet. In other words, if you are in a DMZ network, which means that you probably are on the internet, you could use this app without any VPN connection. But if you're not in DMZ, and if you are only an on-premise or an EBS environment which is only available through intranet, you probably would need VPN for this app to be used. And this app is only available for iOS and Android platforms right now. I haven't really seen any recent updates with respect to Windows. The last time we chatted with Oracle, looks like they don't really have any immediate plans of making that available for Windows. But iOS and Android, you're more than welcome to actually go ahead and use this particular mobile app for free. And Oracle built this particular mobile app using Oracle MAF, which is Mobile Application Framework, and some foundation components that are needed for EBS to log in. So those are the two main building blocks on how this mobile app was built. And to implement this particular app, the prerequisites I would really say are patching. There are a lot of patches that need to be applied, and Oracle has a detailed note on what patches need to be applied based on the Oracle version release that you're on. And that particular information is at the end of the slide, end of the presentation. You would see all the patches that you would need, all the Metalink notes that you could really look at in terms of what you really need as prerequisites to have this app implemented. There are quite a few server-side implementation steps that you got to do to make this mobile app up and running on your client side or on your end users' mobile devices. And all that is covered as the prerequisite steps or the server-side implementation steps in that Metalink note. One quick note on the prerequisites is if you are already using any kind of EMM solution like Mobile Iron or AirWatch, there's a feature called app tunneling, using which you probably could bypass the VPN. I probably will touch a little more in detail as we go along in that at the end of the presentation. But just a quick note that if you are using an EMM solution using app tunneling, you probably could bypass that VPN prerequisite. All right, how do you make this mobile app available to the end user? So where do you get this app? So there are two ways of actually getting this mobile app to end users. One is called the store distribution, and the other is enterprise distribution. By store distribution, what we mean is an end user could go to the App Store if it's an iOS phone, or Google Play Store if it's an Android phone, and can quickly search for this particular app and then download it directly from the App Store. And the name for that particular app is called Approvals for EBS. If you have an iOS phone handy, you can just go to the App Store right now and then look for Approvals for EBS, and you'll find an app that you could download. So that's the exact name for the app that you need to download. The advantages of actually doing store distribution is as an IT infrastructure company, you don't have to keep up with distributing that app to the end users. It's a self-service. They could go and download their app just pretty much like anyone would download any app from App Store. It could be like your banking app, or it could be like your social media apps. So they could just go and then just download and also update the app as and when there's a need. And also, there's no additional work for you to actually distribute that app to the end users of EBS. So those are the pros of store distribution. When it comes to the cons, the disadvantages of doing a store distribution is you pretty much don't have any control on what version you want your end users to use. And as I mentioned in the prerequisites, for a mobile app to really work, there are a lot of server-side patches that you apply. So the client-side app that the end user is downloading and the server-side patches if there's a mismatch, you could potentially run into problems. So that's one of the disadvantages, because you don't have control on what your end users may be downloading and updating on their phones when a new app is available from Oracle. And the other thing is, if you're just downloading it from the store, there would be no corporate branding, so everything is going to look like as if it's from Oracle. So if you want your company's logo, or if you want your own privacy policy on that app, or an end user license agreement, you can't really do that because you have no control on the app that is being downloaded by the end user from the store. And again, push notifications are not supported if it's in store distributed, because you have no control on the app that is being used on an individual mobile device by an end user. On the other hand, there's another form of distribution, and we call it enterprise distribution. So enterprise distribution gives you more flexibility, wherein you can control what version of the app an end user can download. The way Oracle has made this available is Oracle has given a mobile application archive, or a MAR file, as I'm going to refer going forward. A MAR file could be downloaded from Metalink, and you take that MAR file, and then you wrap that MAR file with whatever limited customization that Oracle lets you do. For example, you could take the MAR file and you could put your own logo on that mobile app. You could give your own copyright. You could do your own privacy policy. In fact, you could even change the app name on that, and then put that particular MAR file that has been wrapped around in your iOS and Android components, and make it available to your enterprise users by putting it out in your intranet. And there are different mechanisms on how you could distribute it. So you could just probably put it in like a shared folder where they could just go and download it. In our case, we use AirWatch as our EMM solution. So we put it in our app catalog, wherein our end users would normally go and download any app across the company. So we just put this particular file in our app catalog of AirWatch, and that's where our end users go to get the file. And clearly, the biggest advantage of doing it this way is, as administrators, we have more control on what version is being installed and used by our end users. Even if Oracle pushes a new update to that mobile app, our end users won't really see it, because they're not really downloading it from an app store. They're pretty much getting it from an enterprise control location. So unless we update the app on that enterprise control location, they would not see those new changes that Oracle may have pushed. And again, there could be custom corporate banding that we can do. We could also do push notifications if you have subscription to mobile cloud service. And the disadvantages of this is there will be a little more work that we have to do on our end to make this available to the end users when you do enterprise distribution. By that, what I mean is you have an iOS, Android environment that you just set up in your GA developer, and so you have to do a similar Android environment setup on your GA developer, and then you take this MAR file and then you just wrap it using your iOS and Android components to create an IPA or an APK file, respectively, for iOS and Android, and then you distribute it to end users. So there's a little more work that you have to do when you want to do an enterprise distribution, but the good part is it gives you more control. And once you have this process, you have to do this iteration every time there's a new update. For example, today Oracle has an XYZ version. In 3 months, it has a new client version app that it has released, which means that it has a new MAR file out there for you to download. So you would have to take that MAR file and then download it and then rewrap it in your iOS and Android components and make sure you test it. And then once you're good, you just put it out there in your enterprise control location for your end users to update their app on their mobile device. So in our case, what we have done is we have used enterprise distribution because it gives us more control, and also we had an EMM solution where we could place our Neo app available to the users. So that's on the client side. So now I have done what I need to do to make this mobile app available on a mobile device for my end users. So they went to this enterprise control location, click download. So now they have this mobile app on their phone for them to be able to connect and start using it, there are some steps that we got to do on the e-business suite server side. For that, the first thing you have to do is you have to do the server-side patches. And again, the doc ID that you see on the screen has all the details on what you need to do based on your Oracle version that you're on. And there's a responsibility called Mobile Applications Manager responsibility that you will see when you apply those patches. So once you go to that responsibility, you'll configure the app, you would enable the app, and I'm going to be going through some screenshots on how you would do that. And in our case, we also did some custom workflows as approval types. By that, what I mean is the standard workflows are your expense reports, your purchase orders, your requisitions. In our case, we had a custom workflow process where we were doing like for approval of AR debit memos, we had our own business process and we had a workflow facilitating that. Oracle lets you or gives you the capability of configuring your custom workflows also as approval types in your mobile app so that your end users can go and approve not just the standard workflow notifications, but also your custom workflow notifications that you may have. So in our case, we had that done. And the other big change that we did was a custom region. What do I mean by custom region is when you go to a mobile app, you see the header, you see the details. Say, for example, you're missing a key component that your end users want to see on the mobile app, but that's now out there. In our case, what was missing was our managers who would approve the expense report notifications wanted to see the distributions. But Oracle out of the box was only giving you the expense header and the details of the lines. It was not drilling down to the accounting or the distributions part. And it was very important for our managers to be able to see the accounting behind the expense lines. So we created a new custom region. And in fact, we configured a new custom region. And Oracle has given you all the skeleton to be able to use an existing region that you have and configure that in your mobile app. I'll get into details as we go along. But these are the four high-level steps that you'd have to do on the configurations based on your need. Step 3 and 4, custom workflows and custom regions, are very specific to your environment. So only if there's a need, you would be doing that. But in our case, this is what we've done. On that note, I'm going to go to the enabling of the app. So as I mentioned earlier, you would go to the Mobile Applications Manager, you would go to the application screen. In this case, if you did store distribution, I'm just enabling the standard app out there. So the application name is EBS approvals. You would search for that application and you would click on configure. Once you click on configure, it would give you a screen where you would enable the app. As you can see, there's the status enabled. So by default, there won't be any value here. You just click on the drop down and then you enable that particular app. Other key piece that I want to make a note here is this connection settings. Would you want to use the app's local login or you want to use a single sign-on as your login? So depending on your environment setup, if you are a local login kind of environment, choose that. If not, if you're using single sign-on, using OAM, probably want to choose apps SSO login. And based on what you're selecting, the configuration parameters down here would populate and you could change as needed, like a profile option, or if you want to go by a constant value, you could change those values. In our case, we use single sign-on. Although in our case, we did choose local login, we were doing it differently. We had an FI route that would reroute to the OAM screen. So although we chose local login, we were still using a single sign-on credentials to log into the app. If I were doing enterprise distribution, how would you register that, since it's not a standard out of the box that you're doing, because you took the MAR file, you wrapped it, you gave it your own name. So in our case, what we did was we called it Solink EBS approvals, and we gave it an application short name that starts with XXSL, which we try to keep it standard, like you would do with any of your custom applications. So you would click on this register application and you would give details of the application that you're trying to register. And in this case, just the name is different. Everything else pretty much is the same. I want to make a note on this application bundle ID, which we changed here. So application bundle ID has to be the same between your client application that your end user is downloading and downloading from your enterprise distribution location and what is configured on the server side, because that's what it's tying. And if you have any technical folks on the call, I would relate this to more like a concurrent program definition and a concurrent program executable. You have a short name that would tie those two together. So here, the application bundle ID is pretty much the same. Application bundle ID here on your server side for this application that you're registering should be the same as when you're doing your enterprise distribution. You would download your MAR file from Oracle and wrap it in your JDeveloper. There's a file where you would change this, and it's called, I think, MAF application.xml. I believe that's what it's called. So that's one XML file that you would be changing in JDeveloper, and it has an application bundle ID value in that particular file. So you would change, or you would have the same application bundle ID in that particular XML file and here on your application configuration. So just be mindful of that. And in fact, I think once we distribute this presentation in the notes section, I have mentioned that XML file. So this is how we would configure. So once you do this configuration, you go through the steps, you have your application configured and enabled, and you should be up and running using that mobile app on the screen. Now I want to touch upon the custom workflow that we enable in our case. As I mentioned earlier, we had a debit memo approval process that we have in-house developed as a workflow process. And we wanted our end users to be able to approve the notifications of that workflow too. And Oracle gives you this neat capability of configuring your custom workflows as approval types. And in this case, you would go to a workflow administrator web applications responsibility. You will see a navigation called Approval Data Services Manager. That's like the key for all this communication that happens back and forth between your mobile app and the server. You go to that Approval Data Services Manager and click on Configuration, and you would search for your custom workflow here. And the key is you have to check this response required and then hit go. This is important because this particular mobile app is only designed and catered for any notification that will need a response. For example, if you have like an FII notification that is going to, you would not really want to configure this mobile app with those kind of notifications because there's no action needed on that. And one of the guidelines that Oracle gives you when you're implementing these apps is only configure the messages that would need a response. So make sure you check response required and then hit go. And this would show you all the workflow messages that needed a response under this particular workflow. And then you click on the configurations click on the configuration of the message that you want to show the end user on the mobile app. And when you click on that, it gives you the screen. And what this does is it is actually reading the workflow metadata tables on the database, and it gives you this rendered screen wherein you get to choose the attributes that you want to display on your screen when the end user goes to the mobile app. For example, in this debit memo workflow that we were using, these are all the attributes that were on the workflow message: customer account number, address, name, transaction. But I chose only the customer account number, the name, and the transaction amount, and few other fields to be displayed on the mobile app. So whatever you check as rendered will be shown on the first level of the mobile app, on the header of the mobile app. And the other thing that you can see down below is the result attributes. You could only do an approve and reject. And this is another limitation of the app, is it could only do an approval or a rejection or a reassignment or request for more information. Those are the only things that the app is catered to For example, if you have if you have anybody that is using purchase orders, when you look at a purchase order notification, there are more than approve and reject on that notification. There is like approve and forward or just forward. So those kind of forward and approve and forward are not available as response actions in the app as of today. And this was something that we did bring up with Oracle when we had an offline discussion. And they were keen on understanding if other customers had similar needs so that they could prioritize it. But right now, all you could do from this app is an approval or a rejection or a reassignment or request for more information. This particular configuration screen, it allows you to change the labels. So if you want to say yes for approve and no, you can just change the labels and those labels will appear on your mobile app. And you would configure the screen. You would click on, you go to the next screen, and then here you would see what are the custom regions and what you need to add. And based on how many levels you want to dig, like a header, like a detail, and then you further want to drill down, you would configure all of that in this particular approval type, custom workflow as approval type. Once you have configured your custom workflow, you should be able to see all your custom workflows also as that approval type. One other thing that I do want to mention about approval types is these approval types are not really like your workflow types. It's just a logical grouping of your workflow messages. For example, in our case, we had like 4 messages that were going out for response for our custom workflow. So we grouped all those messages into one approval type called Solving Debit Memos. So for example, expenses, when you click on expenses, it will show you all the expense reports that are waiting for approvals. Like purchase orders, it will show all the purchase orders, requisitions. In our case, we created an approval type called Solving Debit Memos and have all the messages that we have configured in the earlier screen added here. So these are the only ones that would be seen under this Solving Debit Memos. So just a logical grouping of all your notifications. It's nothing more than that. So the way you create this approval type is you will go to this Approval Data Services Manager, Approval Types. There's a Create Approval Type button. And then you would give just the name, what you want to see, the application name, and then you could give a different icon if you wanted to. And this icon would be pulled up from the OA media directory. So if you want to see a different icon for your particular approval type, you just give that particular JPEG file or PNG file in the OA media directory, and it will show up as an icon in your mobile app. And you add all your messages that were configured in the previous screen. Like here is where I configured the workflow notification message, and I would create an approval type and add all those messages right here, so that way they are grouped under this approval type. So that's what we had to do to create a new approval type for our custom workflow. Custom region. What is a custom region? In our case, as I mentioned earlier, we had out of the box, Oracle gives you an expense header, the details, but it doesn't show you the accounting behind that expense line. And for us, we needed that information. So Oracle gives you this capability of creating your own custom region, and that's what we did in our case. So again, you would go to Workflow Administrator Web Applications, Approval Data Services Manager, click on Configuration, and you would search for the notification message that you want to add this new custom region to. And clearly, if you see, I have this response checked. We hit it go, and then we see all the messages that need a response. We click on the message that we want to have a new custom region. You click on Configuration. It brings you this next screen, and you would click on this arrow, this icon where you see to add a new row, and you add a new line, and you give what it should really say on your app, what it needs to look like, what's the title of that particular section or the region. In our case, we wanted distributions to be seen, so we said, okay, it's going to be Solving Distributions. By default, it automatically gives it a unique key to be identified. It was a detail section, so you chose the type as details. And the key piece here I do want to stress is about this root checkbox. So any region that you want to see, like as a drill down after the second level, you will have to uncheck this. For example, if you see on the first line, the expense lines, the root is checked, which tells you that that's the second level details. So you have a header and then you have the details. So for that, you would check the root. But after you go to the lines, then you want to drill down to the distributions. So you would uncheck this root. So in our case, we needed distributions, which was driven by a given line. So we uncheck this root. And there are rules that you could define when you could have this particular region be visible in the app. We didn't have any rules, so we didn't create any. But this is where you would create any rule based on, like say, for example, you want this particular region to be only visible if it is a certain kind of distribution. So you would write those kind of rules here. And you click on details, and then it brings you to this next section. Since this is a detailed or a drill down section from lines, you have to tell this particular view what is the parent view, what is the parent region that it's going to be using. So in our case, you could see the parent region was going to be expense lines, and the region view was cash and other expenses because it had different views. So expense lines had a cash and other expenses view and a credit card expenses view. So this particular region that we created was for the expense lines and cash and other expenses. And then we gave that particular view a title called Soling Distributions again. And here is where we were able to reuse something that we already had. And this is what was impressive, the way Oracle built this particular framework. So as of today, what was happening in our case was when an expense report notification goes to a manager for approval, we had a custom region in that workflow notification based out of a OAF, Vivo, and AM that we had created. So we already had that work done. And what this AM or Vivo was doing was, you give it an expense report line, it would execute a query, and it will give you the distributions for that particular line. So on a very simplistic terms, that's exactly what it was doing. So all we did was we gave that particular AM that we already had being used in our notification. And when you hit go, it shows you the classes that were implemented in that particular AM. It shows you the implementation method. It shows you the Vivo instances. So we just chose that particular implementation method that was running the query, which is this init distribution query. And then it was running against this Vivo, which is called the expense distributions Vivo in our case. So if I had to say this very non-technically, I would say you have a line, you want to see the distributions. All you're doing is you're passing this line to something in the database and saying, hey, can you give me the distributions for this given line? And then to return the distributions for that line. And the way it was implemented in our case was using this AM and Vivo. And even if you don't have something that you already have, to create this AM and Vivo, it's very easy. So you could just write a query, and then you have a Vivo against it, and then you just create an application module for that particular Vivo, and then you could use it in this particular section of it. So this is how you use an existing AM and use the Vivo and the Vivo query. And you have to click on configure parameters here, so that way you pass this particular value to the Vivo for the query to be executed. You click on configure parameters, and here it gives you the capability of choosing what attributes you want to be passing from the lines region to your distributions query in this AM or Vivo. And there are a few workflow attributes, so we were passing workflow notification ID, and from the product attributes, which is nothing but the line, we were passing the line ID. So given these two values, one could go to the database as the Vivo of the query. Given the notification ID, you would get the header ID, the expense report header ID, and then from the line ID, you could use that to get the distribution. So this is what we have done to configure the parameters necessary for the application to retrieve the distributions. So once it runs the query, it's going to return a lot of rows, and then you just configure what you need to be seen on the screen. In our case, it was returning all the segments, all the distributions, or the accounting against that line. So we just changed the prompts for every segment, and we chose which one we want to show. In our case, we probably were showing 5 of these segments, and you chose it to be rendered or highlighted, and you'll take it from there. The description about these options, the highlighted, not rendered, passed, are in the notes, but I do want to touch upon a couple of these. When you click on highlight is the one that would be highlighted on your attribute, where you could click on it and it will drill down. So that's what this highlight is. And not rendered, if you chose not rendered, it will not be shown on the mobile app. Passed is only used for anything that's coming from a parent to a child. For example, this is the drill down section. There's nothing that needs to be passed further. But if you look at the view attributes for the expense lines, you will see that the line ID would have an value of passed. So that way it could be passed from line to the distributions. So it would be passed. And rendered, for anything that you want to be showing on the screen, you would have the option chose as rendered. And you could change the prompts on how these need to be appeared. You could reorder this. So this is all where you would do the configuration of what needs to be seen on the screen for the mobile user. You would hit return, and Oracle gives you a page where you could test this immediately. You could click yes, and then you could test it immediately. And you would hit submit to create that particular region. To touch upon some of the framework that is being used by Oracle in this, Oracle uses this Approval Data Services framework, and it's all it is really a component of your workflow notification infrastructure. Oracle created this framework so that you could read the metadata of your workflow notification tables, which in turn will let you give access to all the underlying data against your notifications. And Oracle uses REST services to use this metadata and talk to your notification information that would come to this mobile app. So it has already built this framework. All you are doing is really configuring on what needs to be read and what needs to be rendered on your mobile app. So this is about the framework of the technology that is being used behind the mobile app. In fact, this is pretty much what will be used if you're really doing a custom app from scratch too, because you don't have to write any web service or you don't have to reinvent that wheel to create any custom app, because Oracle has already pre-built that for you. All you got to do is just use those REST services, and then you should be able to use it in any custom app that you want to build. Some of the challenges that we had when we were doing this was setting up of the iOS and Android environments. And I come from an Oracle development background, and I don't have any experience with iOS development or Android development. I'm familiar with JDeveloper when it comes to OA framework, but everything else was French and Latin to me. So that was the biggest challenge on how to set up iOS and Android environments with JDeveloper, and Oracle has documentation scattered across the board between workflow and also mobile app development. So that was a kind of bit of challenge for us to set up the environments for enterprise distribution. So one thing that we did learn was registering for Apple Developer Program. You need to be registered in the Apple Developer Program to be able to distribute that IPA file once you rewrap it for iOS. So if your company has not already done that, you may have to get that registered. And the images that you want to use, if you're using enterprise distribution, and if you want to use your own logo for a splash screen or your app logo, there are very particular restrictions or specifications, I should say, that you need to have these images created. So and Oracle has a very detailed note on what the specifications need to be for each kind of image that is going to be used for an app logo or a splash screen. So just be mindful of that, and then get your images ready before you get going on enterprise distribution. And the limitations, as I mentioned earlier, was VPN. In our case, we are not an internet-facing environment, so our users have to get into VPN to be able to use this mobile app. So that was one of the biggest limitations that we have right now, is the end user would log on to a VPN on the mobile app, and then they can open this app and start using it. The good thing for us happened on that front was we were using AirWatch as our EMM solution across the company before we even did this mobile app. So we already had the infrastructure on how an end user would be able to get onto the VPN using AirWatch. So it was an easy work for us because all that work was already done before even we were venturing this mobile app for EBS. So using AirWatch, our end users log on to VPN and then open the app to use it. But if you are a company that you are in DMZ and you are already an internet-facing company, you probably don't have to deal with VPN because it's available via internet. One other, I would say, inconvenience for our end users was, or not very user-friendly item that we noticed was when an end user downloads the app for the first time, when they're trying to log in, it asks for an URL that they need to type in. So, for example, if your e-business suite URL is http://mycompany.oracle.com, end users have to type that information in the first time when they log in. And ours was a little complicated than that, the URL. So the users had a little trouble trying to type that in the first time. But once you have that typed in the first time, and when you log out and log back in or come back up, you don't have to enter that URL. It's already stored. So that was it. That was only a one-time thing. And I believe there's a latest release that happened in the past few months. Oracle has given a workaround for this entering of server URL where it could be configured by your EMM administrator so that end users don't have to enter that. But we haven't really updated that app in the past few months, so we don't have that yet. But looks like Oracle has resolved that issue of entering a server URL. Coming to push notifications. Push notification, what is a push notification? So as of today, if you do not have a push notification, and if I'm a manager, unless I open my app, I would not know that there is a expense report waiting for my approval. It's just like an email. Unless you go to your email, you would not really know that you have seen an email. So push notifications actually solve the problem. So the moment an end user sends an expense report for approval, there would be a push notification that would appear on the manager's mobile device, like a pop-up that says, hey, you have an expense report waiting for your approval. For that to be enabled, Oracle has mentioned that you would need subscription to mobile cloud service, which we don't have in our case. So if you are somebody who is keen on having a push notification, just be mindful that you would need to have MCS subscription to enable that feature. And again, I think Oracle has a valid reason why you would need, because there's a lot of, and this is more controlled by your provider, like Apple or Google. So that's why they have to have this intermediate mechanism where they can do push notifications. And for that, they said if you have MCS, we probably could give you that middleware or a route how you could do push notifications. And some of the biggest lessons that we learned were getting your hardware. So since we were not really an Apple MacBook kind of environment, so we had to procure a MacBook and mobile devices for testing. Because for doing an iOS environment, you would definitely need a MacBook. You can't really do that on your Windows workstation to do the iOS wrapping of or creating that IPA file out of the MAR file that is given by Oracle. So get your MacBooks if you don't have one and the mobile devices for testing. Another lesson is, if you have a MAR file that is getting updated and you're doing an enterprise distribution, just make sure you have an automated process that you could really download the MAR file and do that process repetitively where you're branding this MAR file to generate your IPA, which is for your iOS side, and IPK file for your Android environment. And try to get your administrators across your network and your systems and DBAs getting involved from day one, as there's a lot of work pre-legwork that needs to be done in terms of patching or finding out how your enterprise management, mobile management is done today. If you have AirWatch or Mobile Iron, how you could use that, Teams to get this process going smoothly for you in your implementation. And if you don't have a mobile strategy, think about it, because there are tons of mobile apps out there that are free to use with EBS. And just to note a few are like a sales order. There's a sales order app out there. There's an inventory app out there that you could really use if you have license to those modules. And just create your own release management and source control and regression testing procedures for EBS. Because at least for us, this was not something that we have done before. This was uncharted waters for us. So we were trying to streamline everything on our side to make sure we were able to do it more swiftly as we go by, when we have to do this more often. So getting release management, how you do the source control, especially the regression testing, how do you do that? Because this was not like an OAF page or a BI publisher report that you would typically be doing on your EBS environment. This was a little different than how that was handled. So these are some of the challenges and lessons that we learned over the course. And these are the references that I was mentioning earlier. I strongly recommend going through that blogs. Those blogs were really helpful in the way we were doing it. And the developer's guide for workflow, as I mentioned earlier, the information was scattered across different Metalink nodes and documentation. And this was another feedback that we did give Oracle, and then they said they probably will try to condense everything needed at one place. But these are the main Metalink nodes and also the blogs that we have used to get to where we can implement this mobile apps for e-business suite. I think with that, I wrap this webinar. If you do have any questions right now, we would be open for that. Tiffany, I'll give it back to you if you have any questions.
Yes, thank you so much for your presentation, John. As John said, if you have any questions, please type them into the question box. And we'll wait a couple minutes for questions to come in. But while we're waiting on questions to come in, John, do you have any last-minute comments?
One of the things that I would mention is I think there's a recent update that I saw from Oracle about this mobile app. So I think they have fixed some of the issues that we did mention as some of the limitations and challenges like the server URL. And Oracle was also very keen on us using when I say us, all the Oracle e-business customers using the Metalink enhancements option in the support.oracle.com. So if you have anything that you don't see on these apps, just go ahead and put in like an enhancement request or like an idea there and let other EBS customers vote for it, because Oracle was keen on looking at that and then making changes to these mobile apps. So that's just the feedback that I got from Oracle Development Manager when I met one of them at OAUG Collaborate.
Well, thank you so much, John. We don't have any questions that have come in, but John, his contact information is on the screen. So if you have any questions that come up at a later date, feel free to contact him. Again, thank you for your presentation, John. And everyone, don't forget to visit the OAUG Emerging Leaders page to stay updated on the next webinar and to watch past recordings. This concludes another great e-learning session brought to you by the OAUG Emerging Leaders. Everyone have a great rest of the day. Thank you again, John.
Yep. Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Appreciate it.